Hi, hello. Okay, so ngayon naman pag-uusapan natin ang estuaries and intertidal zones. Okay. So what is estuaries and intertidal zones? So these are melts. Discuss the interactions among living things and non-living things in estuaries and intertidal zones. So these are objectives. Recognize estuaries and identify the parts of intertidal zone. Determine the challenges faced by organisms living in the estuaries and intertidal zones. Identify the types of interaction between different organisms living in estuaries and intertidal zones. Compose a simple song that depicts the importance of intertidal zone and the ways to protect them. Can show love and concern to our environment. Okay, so pag sinabi nating estuaries, these are place where fresh water and salt water meets. Kumbaga ito yung pinagduduktungan ng fresh water and salt water. And they are typically found where rivers meet the sea. Okay, yung pinagduduktungan ng rivers at saka ng sea. Yun po yung tinatawag nating estuaries. So the rivers gradually becomes wider as they slowly meander toward the sea. Ito po yung example ng estuaries kung saan duduktong po yung fresh water and salt water. We have Babuyan Channel, Sorsogon Bay, Balsahan Estuary, Lingayen Gulf, Manila Bay, lagoon, harbors, inlets, rivers, streams, wetlands. So it is here that the salt water from the sea mixes with salty but not as salty as the seawater. So yung mixture po ng fresh water and salt water ay ito, yan. So dito nagmi-mix yan. Tinatawag natin siyang brackish water. Bakit brackish? Kasi may mixture po siya ng fresh water at salt water. Okay, salinity measures the amount of salt dissolved in water. It is measured in parts per thousand or ppt. The average sea salinity is 35 ppt. This means every 1 kilogram or 1 liter of seawater, there is 35 grams of salt. Okay, salinity changes gradually within an estuary. Usually, the salinity increases when it is nearer to the sea. Okay, habang malapit na po siya sa sea, mas umaalat po yung tubig. Okay, yung mixture. However, the salinity at the head of the estuary may exceed that of the seawater due to weather and evaporation. So habang lumalapit yung connection ng river at saka itong seaside, yung coastal area, doon nagmi-meet yung seawater and yung fresh water. At nag-iiba yung salinity niya habang papalapit siya doon sa seawater, doon sa sea. For example, this is a salinity varies in an estuary. Ito yung seawater, ito yung fresh water. Ito yung mixture nila, yung brackish water. Okay? Ito yung 5% lang, magiging 15%. Kumbaga, konting salt lang yung seawater yung na-mix doon sa fresh water. Hanggang dito, 35%, hanggang pure salt water. Okay, this is the salinity distribution in a coastal waterway. Kumbaga, naghahalo yung fresh water dito sa river at saka dito sa ocean. Okay? May iba-ibang salinity or amount ng salt or seawater. Yung salt na sa seawater galing. Okay, some plants have adapted to the salty condition and some of them can. filter the salt out through their roots, secrete salt through special vents in their leaves, and store salt in the older leaves or bark that are going to laugh off. So, ganun po yung survival ng mga plants na naandun sa mga place na yon or dun sa mga salty condition. Okay, katulad nito mangrove trees. So, sinasali nila yung salt doon sa mamamatay na leaves na or magiging laya na dahon. Okay, doon nila sini-store. Or they just secrete salt through special glands in their leaves and filter the salt out through their roots. So yung roots yung nag-filter ng salt para tubig lang mismo yung makuha nila. So intertidal zone, it is where the land and sea meet between the high and low tidal zones or littoral zones. This area is along the coastline that is underwater during high tide and above the water during low tide. Okay, ito po yung intertidal zone. Ito po yung upland, ito po yung coastal area, yung pinaliliguan natin. Yan po yung intertidal zone. Okay? Ito po yung coastal waters at makikita natin dyan yung mga ito yung mga damong dagat, tsaka yung mga ibang creatures kapag low tide po siya. So what are the intertidal zone organisms? So merong iba-ibang organism na makikita tayo sa intertidal zone. Okay, pwedeng may mga mussels, limpets, barnacles, periwinkle snail, at iba-ibang sea creatures. So, yung level ba ng tubig, pag di ba pa ganun, pa baba. Okay? So, sa kada level, intertidal zone, may iba-iba ding creatures na naninirahan doon. Okay? So, pag spray zone, ito usually dry. Pag high tide zone, wet during high tide. Kapag low tide, makikita natin itong mga creatures na to. And middle tide zone, wet and dry. And low tide zone is usually wet. So first, this is a intertidal zone. Okay? First is splash zone kung saan kaya tinawag siyang splash, yung waves, yung hampas ng alon o yung dagat, yung tubig ng dagat, okay, ay humahampas dito sa mga bato-bato na to. Yung tawag natin yung splash zone. So may makikita kayo dyan mga konting limpets and periwinkles. And dito sa high tide zone, ito pag high tide, hindi natin yan makikita. Pag low tide, makikita natin yan. Okay? Meron tayong mid tide zone. Kapag low tide, pwede natin ito malakad or makita natin yung structure na yan. Or visible yan sa atin. Then low tide zone, dito na yung masyadong malalim na to. Palalim na ito eh. Kumbaga, hindi masyadong or laging basa yung low tide zone. Okay, first is splash zone. This is generally dry most of the time, submerged only during several storms, okay, very high tides, and repeatedly sprayed by splashing waves. Okay, yan po. Ito po yung spray zone. Yan po, splash zone. Next is upper intertidal zone. It is covered with water during high tide. It is between the average high tide and the average sea level. And it experiences dry periods daily. Kapag low tide siya, natutuyo po siya. Ito yung upper intertidal. Kasama na po ito yung middle intertidal. Pababa kasi yan. Okay? Next is middle intertidal zone. It is between the average sea level and the average low tide level. It also experiences dry periods daily, apart from being more populated. Life in a middle intertidal zone is more diversified then upper intertidal zone, and splash zone. So dito sa middle intertidal zone, maraming mga sea creatures na ang naninirahan dito. Katulad ng mga barnacles, yan. Tumidikit sila dyan, nabubuhay sila dyan. Mga crabs sa middle intertidal. So medyo natutuyo din to kapag low tide. At high tide naman, nababalutan siya or nakakover siya ng tubig kapag high tide. Next is lower intertidal zone. This is submerged in the water and it's only exposed during extremely low tide. This is a great biodiversity. Organisms have low tolerance from extreme changes in temperature and salinity in water or water salinity. Ito na yung laging naka-submerge, okay? Mostly, more on tubig talaga to, okay? Kumbaga, laging basa siya or malalim na siya. Malalim na part na to. At naiiga lang siya kapag sobrang low tide or sobrang naubos yung tubig. Okay? Nagkaroon ng low tide. Doon mo pala makikita yung structure niya. Yung makita niyo yung mga seaweeds, may iba-ibang creatures, sea creatures. At tulad nito, yan. This is low intertidal zone. Dito may makikita kang iba-ibang sea creatures. Fish. Pwede na rin dito yung fish kasi lagi siyang basa or laging may tubig. So organisms living in the estuaries and intertidal zones face a lot of challenges such as moisture. Organisms must be able to adapt to both very wet and very dry conditions. Next is wave actions. The strong waves can carry away poorly adapted organisms. Next is salinity. Salinity organisms must be able to adapt to the changing salinity during the tides. Siyempre, yung salt content noon, yung salinity, kinakailangan mag-adapt yung organism. Next is temperature. Temperature ranges from the moderate temperature of the water to air temperature that is scorching. Diba? So, kung nag-a-adapt sila doon sa malamig na temperature, kapag low tide naman, mainit na temperature. Diba? So, yun yung mga factors. Next is predators. There are always predators such as birds and mammals that prey on the animals living here or in that intertidal zones or estuaries. So interaction in estuaries and intertidal zones. So types of interactions. There are few types of interactions between different organisms living in estuaries and intertidal zones. Okay, first is predation. It is when one organism eats another organism to obtain nutrients. So yung mga organism na kinakain nila ay tinatawag nating prey. At itong mga animals na kumakain ng prey ay tinatawag nating predator. This is an interaction between one organism and another organism. Dahil nga carnivorous sila, kinakailangan nila ng kumain ng ibang organism para mabuhay. Next is, okay, ito yon example. Red drum is the prey and seagull is the predator. Next is competition. Different species compete for space and food, katulad ng barnacles. Kapag sa isang space or isang bato, doon sila nagko-compete, nagdidikit-dikit sila at nag-aagaw-gawan ng ng kanilang source of food. Yan, mussels, barnacles. Next is commensalism. This is an interaction in which one organism benefits while the other neither benefit nor harm. Kumbaga yung isa ay hindi nagbe-benefit sa isa. Okay lang May isang organism na okay lang na hindi na mag-benefit doon sa baga kahit hindi siya mag-benefit or at hindi rin siya nasasaktan. Okay, for example, this one, barnacle and shell, itong tahong, yan. So yung itong tahong nagbe-benefit siya, itong barnacle na nakadikit, nagbe-benefit siya kasi nakakakuha siya ng pagkain, okay, doon sa tubig, di ba? Yung maliliit na planktons. And then yung tahong, wala naman siyang benefit na nakukuha or hindi naman siya na-harm kasi nakadikit lang naman siya doon sa shell. Next is mutualism. This is a relationship in which both species benefit. So dito pag mutual relationship. Okay, mutualism, yan, para sila nagbe-benefit. Give and take lang. Give and take relationship. For example, crocodile and the bird. Yung plover bird, kinukuha niya yung mga tira-tirang pagkain doon sa ngipin o doon sa bunganga ng crocodile at doon sila nabubuhay. At yung crocodile nagbe-benefit niya kasi lumilinis yung kanilang teeth dahil doon sa ginagawa ng plover bird. Next is parasitism. This is a relationship in which one organism benefits but the other organism is harmed, though not always killed immediately. Kumbaga, na-harm na or naapektuhan na yung system ng isang organism dahil sa parasites. So yung parasites, hindi po siya mabubuhay nang wala siyang host. Ay, for example, roundworms in fish and griffins isopod. Okay, next is food chain and food webs. So a food chain is a diagram that shows how energy moves from one organism to another when one organism eats another. So this is a food chain. We have producers. First, oak tree leaves. Kinain siya ng caterpillar. This is the primary consumer. And yung energy na nagaling sa producer ay na-transfer dito sa primary consumer. Pero yung energy ay nabawasan na. Okay? Next is the tree creeper or small bird. Kinain niya yung caterpillar, which is the secondary consumer. So yung energy na nakuha ng primary consumer ay mababawasan at yun yung mapupunta sa secondary consumer. Next is hawk, which is the tertiary consumer because ano siya, carnivorous. So kakainin niya itong tree creeper. At yung energy na nakuha ng tree creeper ay mababawasan at yun yung mapupunta sa hawk. So ano po yung mga producer ay mga aquatic plants ang producer. Patulad ng phytoplankton, producer yan. Tsaka yung mga ibang mga aquatic plants. Okay, for example, yung phytoplankton kinain ng barnacle. And then yung barnacle kinain ng sheephead fish. And yung sheephead fish kinain ng pelican bird. Or seaweed kinain ng snail mud. And then yung snail mud kinain ng shore crab. And yung shore crab kinain ng catfish. So ganun po yung food chain or food web. So lahat ay connected. Kumbaga, yung isa ay pwedeng pagkain ng isang organism or ng ibang organism pa. Next is detritus. This is dead animals or plants or parts of plants such as the leaves fall into the water. Okay, dead parts ito ng plants and animals na palutang-lutang po sa dagat. When we say detrivores, these are filter feeders that feed on detritus. Sila po yung janitor ng karagatan. Sila yung naglilinis ng mga dumi katulad ng dead animals and dead plants. Okay, so these are example of Detrivores. Yan, sila po yung naglilinis ng mga dumi or na kumakain ng mga dead plants and dead animals. Next is intertidal zone food web. Kung meron tayong food chain, meron naman po tayong food web. Bakit ba siya tinawag na food web? Kasi salungat-salungat na siya. Kumbaga dun sa isang animals, pwedeng marami yung kumakain doon ng animal. For example, yung sculpin fish. Kinakain siya ng hermit crab, ng crab at saka lobster. So, salungat na ito. Kumbaga, lahat ay nakikinabang na or nangangailangan ng pagkain. May mga herbivores, may mga carnivorous organism na nagdedepende sa ibang mga organism para mabuhay. So, example is seaweed. This is the producer. Kinain siya ng sand dollar and starfish. At yung sculpin fish, kumakain siya ng starfish and sand dollar. Pero itong sculpin fish, kinakain siya ng hermit crab, ng crab and lobster. And yung octopus naman, kinakain niya itong hermit crab, crab and lobster. So, dyan yung paikot-ikot yung cycle ng food chain or food web. Diba? Okay, ito po yung another example of food web. Salungat na siya. Marami nang involved na organism na may organism na kumakain ng mga ng producer or na mismong producer or herbivorous na animals. And then yung herbivorous animals, kinakain sila ng mga carnivorous animals. At yung ibang carnivorous animals ay kinakain ng ibang carnivorous animals. Okay, so this is the energy loss as heat. So yung primary producer, yung energy na meron siya is 100%. Kapag kinain siya or consume siya ng primary consumer, mababawasan yung energy at hindi na lang yung energy na makukuha ng primary consumer, which is 10%. And ganun din sa secondary consumers. Yung energy will lost as heat and konti na lang yung matitirang energy hanggang sa maubos na ng apex predators or ng third level consumers. At itong lahat na ito, yung primary producers or consumers, pag yan sila ay namatay, ang makikinabang dyan ay ang decomposers. Ito yung magbe-breakdown ng mga parts toong consumers and producer at magiging fertilizer sa lupa or sa dagat. Okay? So, kasi meron tayong 10% rule of energy food pyramid. So 10% rule, 10% of the energy harvested at a lower trophic level is transferred up to the next higher trophic levels. Okay, for example, kung may 10 o yung 100,000 na energy, kukuha tayo ng 10% dun sa 100,000, ang mapupunta na lang sa primary consumer ay 10,000. And then yung 10,000 na nakuha na-consume na kapag siya ay kinain ng secondary consumer, 10% lang yung makukuha niya, which is 1,000. And so on and so forth. Hanggang maging 10 na lang yung makuha ng pinakadulo, yung apex predators. So, konti lang yung energy na nakuha nila doon sa mga consumers. So the living things in this estuary also interact with the land-living things such as sunlight, oxygen, salinity, temperature, and nutrients. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Bye bye.